This aircraft is not at all like the standard Mallards. This one was designed for a very wealthy man, and it's his private plaything. Of course, he'd have two pilots, and he probably flew it a lot himself. I'm not sure. But these seats are calfskin leather. And there's just the two seats up here with this couch, and there's three seats back behind. And it's just unbelievable. Even the ceiling, the walls, everything is made of this calfskin leather. The only thing it's not is the flight deck. The poor pilots would sit up there in abject poverty while the rest would party back here. Turn it or something? Or what?
No, it's all 360. It's getting everything.
Ooh.
Yeah, we don't have to move it around.
Okay.
It's getting me as well, so.
Oh, okay. Now, we have the breaker switches in here. You can see how it has the green paint in there. That's the standard color that's put on here to protect aluminum. And you can see where it out through some of these holes, there's the wall. And on this side we have another panel box in here. I think this one here is more for the stereo unit that was on the aircraft, because if you can see up here, there's a couple switches for the stereo and for the coffee.
Important. Those seem like very important things to have in this particular aircraft.
Of course. Yeah.
And this entire kind of console is essentially a luxury, bar type scenario. We found wine glasses in there.
Yeah, you can put just about anything you want in here. This is a refrigerated dispenser in here. And there's just all kinds of neat little places to store things here. Obviously, in the commercial version of these aircraft, all of this section here would not be here. There's a coat closet back there that would not be here, and it would just be full of seats. I understand that they could have taken as many as 18 people in the back of this. In fact, I know of one with Chalk Airlines that had 18 people in it. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. But it's beyond luxurious. Even the carpet on the floor, and there's this fabric on each of the walls.
It doesn't feel like an aircraft that was built, just after World War II. It feels pretty modern. You could slap a couple of flat screens in here, and it would look just like anything modern day.
And all along here, you see these air vents and lights. There's lights all through here up on the ceiling. I don't see any call buttons though, so I don't think they had flight attendants.
Yeah.
The switches on there are for just turning the light on.
It's a beautiful, beautiful aircraft. Let's go check out the cockpit.
We're in the flight deck or the cockpit of the Mallard now, and you notice the instrument panel. This is the captain's side, or the aircraft commander, and the co-pilot was on this side. Notice the co-pilot only has 6 instruments on his side. That's all that he really needs. There's an altimeter there, a rate of climb, a compass, artificial horizon, airspeed indicator, and a turn and bank indicator. That's all you really need for normal flying. Over on the captain's side, though, we have a lot more instruments. We have cylinder head temperature, and you notice there's 2 arcs there. The one arc is, of course, for the right engine. The other arc is for the left engine. This is the tachometer. This has 2 needles in it, and one has an L and one has an R, so you can see whether you're tacking your right or your left engine. This is the manifold pressure. Again, there are 2 needles on there marked R and L for left and right. This is the cylinder head temperature. This has the arc type of the 2 different needles so that you can see it better. These 2 instruments over here are for navigation. The vertical needle on these is for like station to station type of navigation. You would tune in on the navigation side of this radio a certain frequency, which would be a station somewhere in front of you, hopefully, and it would operate the vertical needle on one of these 2 instruments. We have 2 navigation radios in here. This way we can get like cross sections of where we are and get a better idea of our location. The horizontal one here is for the flight scope, or the flight path. Glide slope. There we go. It's for the glide slope. As we're coming into a runway, there's a radio beam that shoots out at a certain angle, and that'll give you a reference to how high you are at certain positions on the airport. If the needle goes up, that means you're below the glide slope, and if it goes down, you're above the glide slope. So if you keep these 2 needles right in the center, then you're heading right straight for the runway at the proper descent angle. And there's 2 of these. This instrument over here is, of course, the speedometer, airspeed indicator. This airplane would cruise. Do you have that?
I have it here.
This would cruise about 160 miles an hour. And the top speed was about 220. And as you can see, we have the green line on here. Then when it goes yellow, then that's when you better not go any faster. And if it goes red, you're going to crash. Next one is the artificial horizon. It's a gyroscopic instrument, and it wouldn't be working without the engines running, because the engines will provide the power for the gyroscope. But there's like wings on here, and that shows the position of the airplane, and the background will turn left or right, and that'll show you how the airplane is compared to the horizon. Then we have another altimeter over here. We are about 800 feet above the sea level at this airport. A turn and bank indicator. This instrument coordinates our turn. As we make a left turn, the right or the left aileron is going to come up or come down, and that'll cause a bit of a drag, which will pull the nose of the aircraft to the left, and then you use the rudder pedals to overcome that. That's called a coordinated turn. The needle on here will give us an idea of the angle of banking, either to the right or to the left. And if you keep that ball in the center, then you are coordinated. Your turn is coordinated. This is a compass. It's a gyro compass. Again, this runs off the gyroscope as well. Vertical speed. This tells you how many feet per minute you're going up or down. And these are just oil and fuel gauges and oil temperature. And this is for the left engine, and that's for the right engine.
Doc,
Sir.
this instrument panel right here, how changed or unchanged would this be from when this aircraft was first made? Obviously, some instruments are being updated and modernized. Does this instrument panel look pretty much unchanged as it would be?
The only thing that's in here are these 2 instruments here for navigation. Back in the day when this aircraft was built, we had what we call the different colors of patterns. Like when you look at your map, you'll see a yellow line going vertical. That would be that line, and then you have a horizontal line would be, I think it was blue or something. And the instruments were more in line with that type of navigation. But all these other instruments are very standard for when this aircraft was used. Another thing we have down here, I don't know if you can see it on this camera, this is the landing gear position. With the red and white stripes on here, it means that the landing gear is in the down position, and then it would be blank when it's in the up position. I don't know if it can be seen on the camera, but right down here there's a little window where you can actually look through that window and see the nose landing gear. On the Grumman Goose, which is what I'm more familiar with, there are little windows on the side in this position, and we could actually see the landing gear as it would come up and go down on each side there. Now these are all radios. These 2 up here are navigation and communication, and these 2 are navigation and communication. This down here is a transponder, or they have that set for hijack, 7600.
Somebody knew we were coming.
Evidently. On the radar at the air traffic control, they can see a little blip, and if you tune in a certain number on the transponder here, it will show that number, and 7700 is emergency, 7600 is hijack, And that makes like an explosion on the aircraft or on the X-ray screen. So if you can secretly tune this in while you're being hijacked, then that lets air traffic control know that something is amiss. So 7700 is emergency. Normal visual flight rule squawk number is 1200. So if we were just out playing, that's what we would squawk on this transponder, and that'll let people know that we were just out playing. Down here we have a weather radar. I've never used this, so I'm not sure just how it works. You can get different, it's in color too, which is something, this is one of the instruments that is new. The weather radar at one time is just light and dark. This is actually colored, which will give you a lot more array of weather types. And of course, you always have your cigarette lighter. At one time, you could smoke while flying, and they did that on this aircraft a lot.
Clearly, there's ashtrays everywhere.
Yes, but there are signs above for smoking and non-smoking. Can we see on the floor here?
We can see not here, I don't think.
Okay. I don't know if you want to open it, but back here is the emergency pump for getting the landing gear down. And back here is the landing gear handle. You'd put this in the position that you'd want it, either up or down, and then you have to pump on here to get the landing gear into that position. Otherwise, it runs off hydraulic pumps, which are hooked to the engines. And down here we have the same thing, but it works for raising and lowering the landing flaps. And like I said, this is the landing gear handle. Mm-hmm. This is the standard. It's not the emergency.
What's all these switches and toggles and stuff up here?
We're getting there.
Oh, we are.
Since this is a flying boat, there's bilges down in the lower part, and water comes into the bilges. So we have these this is the bilge pump switches here, which will pump the water out of the bilges as we come in. This little handle up here, there's another one exactly like it. Over on this side are the fire extinguishers in case we get an onboard fire. Up here we have the cowl flap the trim tabs, and this is the rudder trim tab. Now, as Euan just said, what is going on up here? Do you have your big flashlight?
I do.
Okay. Being a amphibious aircraft with a high wing, we have a lot of the instruments and the engine controls and things above the cockpit, so that we don't have to run so many different cables through and up and around. Starting over on this side, we have the primer. This will shoot the fuel into the engine when we are ready to start. Right behind here is the starter switch. This is the master switch for the radio. We have a battery switch left and right. And these are the voltometers up above here to show how much volts we're getting out of the generators. This is a fuel selector valve. Each fuel selector valve has a pump on it, and you never switch from one tank to another without turning on the pump, because you could easily get an air bubble in there, and the engine does not like air bubbles. So we put on the switch and then go from left to right. There's 2 tanks in each wing. These are the Magnetos. This is the left engine. That's on both mags, left mag, right mag, and then off. And it's the same on this side. Here's another fuel selector. This tells us how much fuel we have in each wing, and it says 160 is the maximum that you can put in here. Landing lights, there's an extension on here, so we turn these on, and that will extend the lights so that they're shining forward, and it's turning them on and off. The position lights are the lights on the wings and up on the tail, the back lights. So we turn those on, and the flashers, the it's like the strobe light that's will flash on and off. Then we have anchor lights. This, when it's on the water, is a boat.
I was about to say, at what point do you become from a pilot to a sailor? Or to a captain?
While we're on the water,
okay,
we are a sailor.
Do you change your hat or uniform?
Yeah, turn the hat around. Sailors have the hat on backwards.
Okay.
So I'm a sailor in this position. Okay, but this light here is for turning on so that when our aircraft is anchored out in the water, then we have to have the proper nautical lighting on it. This is called a rheostat. That just makes it lighter, brighter, or dimmer. Turn this all off so we don't kill the battery. It's not in here. Of course, this has fresh air or cabin heat. Heater off, heater on. And this is the breaker switch for that. This energizes the fire extinguisher on this side and this side. And back here we have the fire extinguisher handles. This is the breaker switch. And this is a cabin heater fire indicator. We don't want to have the cabin heater burning, especially if you're flying. Okay, over on this side. This is called the vertical trim tab. As we turn this, it moves a small flap back on the elevator, and it'll bring the nose up or down, and that'll take a lot of weight off, because sometimes you'll be flying along, the airplane just feels heavy. So you can move this and it'll adjust the trim tab. Right now it's set at 0. This is the flap handle. As we pull it back, we can go to 7.5 degrees, 30 degrees, 45 degrees. And the 45 degrees is when we're landing. I usually take off with 30 degrees. This is the wing, or the propeller controls. As you push it forward, you go to a full pitch, which is grabbing as much air as possible, and that's when we get the most power. Then once we get in the air, then we can just pull this back until we get an indication on the tachometer of what the speed of the engine is going. These are the throttles, left and right engines. And once we get these into position, we can turn this crank here, and that'll tighten it, because an airplane will vibrate, and sometimes these levers will move a little bit in and out, and it can throw off the harmonic sounds of the engine. Because if the engines aren't running at the very same speed, you get anyone who knows anything about music will understand how you have to synchronize sounds so that you're in tune. These are the throttle, are the mixture controls. The higher an airplane goes, the thinner the air becomes, and therefore we have to thin the fuel so it's match the air. So if we have full rich at say 10,000 feet, we're flooding the engine. So you have to pull it back to mix it. The way I used to do it, I would move it back very slowly until the engine started to sputter, then I'd go forward just a little bit. As soon as that smooths out, then that's usually set at the right position. These are the cowl flaps. We talked about cowl flaps on the engine's cowling earlier. When the flaps are open, more air will go through the engine and come out the back, and it keeps the engine cool while taxiing or idling. And of course, once you're flying, the air going through it will keep it cool. Like I said before, these are variable pitch propellers out there. When an engine stops, with the propeller being flat against the air, becomes a lot of drag, and it'll pull the aircraft in that position. We can set the propeller so that it's directly into the wind. That's called feathering, and that's what these two things are for. If we lose, say, the right engine, I can just push this button, and it'll automatically go to feathering, and it'll be much less drag, and it won't be windmilling. And a windmilling engine is a lot of drag, and it's really hard to operate the aircraft. I think we pretty much got each of these things here.
Just like to say, the leather does run up into the roof here, so it is pretty luxurious still, you know?
Oh yes, the pilots do have a little bit of...
They do have a little bit of...
Yeah.
And these seats aren't too bad either.
Not too bad.
Not as good as these ones back here, but
Right. I don't like the sheepskin thing on here, though. It feels warm to me.
yeah. Yeah, and that's probably not exactly what you need when I think about these planes were mostly flying in, you know, nice locations you want to go beaching in, not
Exactly.
yeah.
Now, one thing this aircraft has that most aircraft does not have is this car handle type window crank. As you can see, I can crank the window up just like you would in an automobile. But I kind of like to have it down, and I can sit here flying, you know, my arm out the window and just enjoying my little flight. Can't do this in an airliner.
What was a plane like this like to fly, Doc? You obviously have experience in not the Mallard, but you know, how did it differ than you know, a regular aircraft?
Once it's in the air, it flies quite a bit like a regular aircraft. There's trim tabs on it so that we can take, like I was saying, we have the trim tabs up here. Where did I find out the trim tab? Over here for the rudder or for the elevator. So it makes it easier once we get flying and you trim it up. It just flies like a normal aircraft. But taking off is a little bit different, off the water that is.
Because this thing could land on land and water. It wasn't just relegated to the water. It could land on a regular runway as well.
Exactly. And when I was flying the Goose, we'd land on water and taxi up onto the land. To make a takeoff, everything is full forward. I have the flaps at 30 degrees. I hold the control columns back and go to full power. And I keep the control column back as we're going along. And there's a place, we always call it the sweet spot. It's not something that you really learn, it's something that you just understand. And when the airplane gets into that sweet spot, and we just let the control column go forward a little bit, and it'll rise up on the step. And we were talking about the step back here earlier. And when it gets up on the step, then there's very little drag in the water. And this thing will really pick up speed, and it'll actually lift itself off. You don't pull it up. Sometimes if you pull it up, it'll start skipping. And each skip is going to be bigger than the other one. The best thing to do is power back and stop the takeoff. But if you just let the airplane come off the water by itself, then once you get it up, then you can adjust your manifold pressure and RPM and let it climb. And then once you get up in the air a little bit, then you'll adjust the mixture control, and the cowl flaps will go closed. And it's just very, very easy to fly.
And what about landing?
Landing is pretty much the same. You have to kind of keep the tail up a little bit, but yet you don't want to get it down too far. If the tail hits the water, you land it on the step like you take off. If the tail hits the water, it's going to start bouncing. And I've seen videos of Grumman gooses coming in, and they hit the water and they start bouncing, and then they go back and forth. And I saw one that went up right up on the beach, and that's terribly embarrassing. You don't want to do anything like that. But landing on land and landing on the water are very, very similar, except you just want to make sure that you land on the step, and as you're coming down with the power, and slowly begin the flare until you're on the water, and then you can power back. And the Goose, one thing the Goose had that this doesn't have is the water rudder. And once we were on the water, we could extend that, and we could steer it just like we do in the air with the rudder pedals. With this aircraft here, once it's going slow, you're not getting much air going over the air rudder. So there's very little lateral control. So you have to do what we call differential thrust. Or if you want to turn to the right, then you add more power to the left engine, and that'll pull us around to the left. And the same if you're making a right turn.
Well, Doc,
Sir.
Thank you for spending some time and giving us a tour of this incredibly interesting and luxurious aircraft.
You're very welcome. Oh, that's the windshield.